Well, hello, my fellow burnout besties, and welcome to another episode of the Millennial Reset. So listen, I feel like we all know somebody in their 30s that's kind of just had their F it all moment, right? Maybe they quit their job, moved abroad, or traveled in the country in a travel van. Or maybe it's just that they've moved into their granny era, where they just want to be left alone to their gardening and crochet. Now, some might be tempted to call it a midlife crisis, but I think we all know that as millennials, our life crisis is every day, so we can rule that out. But there definitely seems to be this shift, or at least a strong thirst for a shift, for a lot of us 30-somethings that are realizing that the old American dream is broken and no longer works, if not a flat-out lie. I, myself, had my little whisper start shortly after COVID when I was spending more time alone by myself and reflecting on life. And that whisper just kept growing louder and louder. And I thought at the time that the solution was to quit my job so I could just focus on me. And that's what I did. I ended up leaving my full-time position. I was working very minimal part-time hours, but it wasn't actually the lack of work that created the shift in me. It was taking the time that I had to focus on giving myself what I neglected for so many years. More self-care, more being nicer to myself, more reparenting myself. And that's what allowed me to step into this kind of different, authentic self version and separate a bit from my survival self. So today's topic is one of those where it's like, if you know, you know. We're talking about what happens when you decide to radically shift your life and mindset. When you are fed up with the old way of life and decide to take bold ass action to set yourself out on a new path. Where you finally become aware of all of your conditioning. And then you start doing whatever kind of therapy it takes to start stripping it away. So if you're new here, welcome to your new safe space to heal. I'm your host, Peter Goose, former teacher turned corporate millennial, and after a 2-year break to focus on my own healing, I've got a fire lit within me to help as many millennials that are on that same journey to finally address your burnout and get yourself back. Some might call me a millennial life and mindset mentor. Some might call me a rediscovery coach. I don't know. I just call myself Peter because at the end of the day, I'm just another person like you doing my part out here in this universe that we're all living in. But take it from me, and I'm sure that those that, came out on the quote-unquote other side of this would agree. When you decide to take a different path than everybody else, a different one than the one that's been carved out for you, you gotta be prepared for what's about to happen. Because what's about to happen is that you are going to start shedding your old self and start creating the new self. And, you're never going to completely lose that old you, but the dial's going to be turned way down. And it's right after you decide to make that shift and you take those first few steps in that new direction that are the hardest. Because it means that you have to part ways with the version of you that has kept you safe all this time in order to step into the new you that's focused on keeping you safe and happy. And there's this really uncomfortable in-between space that feels like pure chaos. It's like the story of the transformation of a caterpillar to a butterfly. Because in that in-between space, you are completely breaking down everything that's been so far in order to rebuild into something completely new, different, and beautiful. And that breakdown always happens before the breakthrough. And after that, there's really no going back, which can be really exciting and really fucking scary. So how can you make it less scary? That's what I want to share with you on today's episode. There's, so many of us that know we can't keep going like this for the next 30 years of our career in life. We know that deep down it's not sustainable or what we want. And we may not know yet, but at least we're becoming more aware of all of our conditioning. And there's that voice that usually starts as a whisper from inside that just gets louder and louder, encouraging you to shift the direction on your life. But the thing is, most of the time what we want takes a back seat to what's going to keep us safe. And it's a lot safer, or at least that's our perception, to keep doing things the way we always have done them, and like everybody else is doing, than to take the path less traveled. But everyday millennials are doing this every day. And if you don't believe me, go back and listen to season 1 of the podcast with some of the stories of those that took the leap. Sometimes it wasn't always a physical leap. Yes, there was some pretty awesome stories of people that, quit their jobs and moved to another country or started their own passion projects and started chasing their own dreams again. But there's others whose reset was more subtle, like just starting therapy after years of putting it off, or finally setting boundaries so that they have more time to rediscover themselves. So, regardless of what it is that you envision for your future self, I want to break this down into kind of the 3 stages to anticipate with at least a framework to start from. So here we go. Number 1, rest and then rest more. So what do I mean by that? If you're like me and the millions of other millennials that have hit that brick wall of burnout, then most likely this way of life has left you with like a horribly dysregulated nervous system. You might be experiencing those 3 a.m. anxiety alarms because your cortisol levels are just that out of whack. Or you might have emotional blowouts where you explode on someone that you actually love because your cup is already so full, and even the tiniest things can make that soda bottle explode. And this one's the doozy. You might not even be able to rest, because the moment that you do, your mind starts racing at 1,000 miles an hour, reminding you of everything that you should be doing instead right now. All of these things have one thing in common. They are an effect of your body's chemistry and the way that your brain is currently wired. And, here's the thing that is incredibly empowering when you become aware of it all. When you are in this mode, this survival mode, your subconscious emotional brain is running the show. It's sucking up all your energy reserves for the fight or flight response, which means that there's no energy left over for the part of your brain that's responsible for decisions and planning for your future. So what I'm trying to say here is, before you start to think your way out of this, first, just focus on giving your body and brain that have been running a marathon with no water breaks a rest. And when I say rest, that doesn't have to mean just laying in bed or sleeping, right? Rest could look like treating yourself to a spa day. Rest could be going out and just being in nature for a few hours. When I say rest, what I really mean is just giving yourself the experiences that your body and brain need to feel safe and at peace. And it doesn't have to be a big, long hike. It can be taking 10 minutes in the morning just for yourself. Maybe you journal or meditate. Whatever it is that you feel like you need, start giving it to yourself. And again, going back to that caterpillar butterfly analogy, it might feel like pure chaos. You might feel even more exhausted. But here's what I want you to understand. When you come out of living in survival mode, your body starts to heal, which it hasn't had a chance to do, possibly for years. Because again, all the energy has been required for that repeat fight or flight mode. So it is quite possible that you are going to feel so exhausted that you begin to tell yourself that you're not doing something right. But just remember, when those exhaustion spells come, this is actually a sign that your body finally feels safe enough to move into parasympathetic mode and to start healing the damage from the last several months or years. So just allow yourself to continue to focus on rest. And you'll know the difference here when it happens, because it's one thing to rest, but still have your brain going like a freight train with ruminating thoughts on the past and future. But this type of rest is just simply rest without all the extra noise. So instead of trying to, assign meaning to that feeling, just let it be and give yourself permission to heal. All right, number 2, start with intentions, not goals. Let me tell you what I mean by this. When you have experienced as much craziness and chaos in your lifetime, like most of us millennials, your brain gets really used to a mode of just simply reacting to one emotion and one unprecedented historical event after another. And, kind of like what we talked about before, when your brain is so busy reacting, there's no energy left for creating. But when you do give yourself that time to rest and you begin to feel safer again, that part of your brain that's responsible for creating and logical thinking that moves you forward instead of stuck in your past, that turns back on again. And let me tell you, besties, I spent so much time trying to think my way out of burnout when that part of my brain wasn't online. And all it did was make me more burnt out. But again, once you actually give yourself that time to rest, which doesn't just happen in a day or a week, so, be patient and gentle with yourself here. But over time, all of the whole, thinking part of this becomes so much more effortless and clear. Because your conscious self has the capacity required to actually become the powerful machine that it is. And this is where you can begin to set your intentions for this next phase. And I love the word intention versus, goal or outcome here. Because when we set a goal, it's usually really specific. I want more money, or I want to be able to afford a house, or I want a new job, right? Whatever it is. It's very tied to our, 3D world of materialism. But an intention, that feels different. It's not based on a specific outcome. It's like a compass that allows you to achieve all those goals and more. And it's usually not a thing, but instead it's like a feeling or an emotion. So here's what I want you to try out on your own. Simple technique. Ask yourself, what do you want? And then ask yourself why 5 times. So, quick example here, right? I want to make more money. Okay, well, why? Because I don't want to stress out about being able to afford things. Okay, great. Why? Because it sucks always having to worry about money instead of being able to focus on other things. Okay, great. Why? Because then I never get the chance to think about the other things that would make me happier. Well, why would that matter? Because I'd be much less stressed and much more at ease and happy. Right, so eventually, as you can kind of see here, it becomes less about the thing or solving a problem, and it becomes more about the desired human emotion, the way you want to feel. And that's what an intention allows you to do. Focusing more on how you want to feel, and then allowing the universe to do its job and meet you halfway. We put so much pressure on ourselves to achieve these goals in order to, quote unquote, make it out there. And it all comes from, again, that comparing ourselves to others. But when the goal doesn't happen, then we beat ourselves up. We shame ourselves. We guilt ourselves. So, number 2, shift from goals to intentions. And then number 3, y'all, this was a powerful one for me. Gift yourself with emotional experiences. So there's this whole, I guess you can call it a flow chart in the area of mindset work, where when we work backwards and we start with your identity, right? Your identity is created by your personality, your values, your beliefs. And those beliefs stem from patterns of habits and behaviors and thoughts. And your behaviors and actions, or how you respond, are a result of a combination of hormones, thoughts, and emotions. So then it makes sense then, if we're trying to shift who we want to be, our identity, then we start at the beginning with changing your hormones, thoughts, and or emotions. So, let's start with hormones. There's hormones that make us feel excited or stressed, like cortisol and adrenaline. There's hormones that make us feel motivated, happy, calm, like dopamine or serotonin. And there are certain things that you can do to promote good hormones, right? Like exercising or changing your diet. But it requires quite a bit of discipline and work, right? So then, okay, if it's not changing your hormones, let's talk about changing your thoughts, controlling your thoughts. Control your thoughts, control your life, right? No, because 95% of our thoughts come from the subconscious. It's those reactionary thoughts that just happen on autopilot. And frankly, most of them tend to be pretty negative, because it is your subconscious's job to keep you safe. So your mind has this sort of, built-in negativity bias where your thoughts will always go to thinking about the worst case scenario before even considering the best. And so to truly change your thoughts, it requires you to do the work at a subconscious level. And I talk a lot more about this in the Millennial Mindset Makeover. For those of you that have taken the 30-day challenge, you'll know that. But again, it requires doing the inner work. So, okay, if it's not hormones and if it's not thoughts, then that leaves us with emotions. And emotions can be influenced by thoughts or hormones. But when we think about getting intentional here, emotion can also be influenced by the experiences we give ourselves. So again, it goes back to intentions. The first thing you got to figure out is, how is it that you want to feel? We spend so much time trying to avoid how we don't want to feel sometimes that we forget to remind our brain, how is it that we do want to feel? And then once you're clear on that, begin to think about what experiences from your past have allowed you to feel that certain way before. Or what new experiences could you give yourself that would foster that same emotion? So a good example of this is, all of us millennials, we just want to be able to afford that house finally, right? That's the goal. But when you do the practice of asking yourself 5 times, you're eventually getting down to the feeling. Maybe what you really want is a relaxing space for yourself or a greater sense of peace. Now, one way I can get that sense of peace is by focusing on the house. But with each day that passes and we still don't have the house, that's where those feelings of frustration, the feelings of lack, right? That takes the place of our desired feelings. So instead, if I want to feel more calm and more peace, then I know for me that escaping to nature makes me feel that way. So maybe it's gifting myself with getting out into nature once per week to start. And not doing it for the exercise, mind you, or the pretty selfies. Those are all great added benefits, but doing it because you know that it's going to foster your desired emotion. Or maybe it's just busting out a bunch of candles and curling up under your favorite blanket in your living room fort that you've built for yourself, right? You might not be able to have the house, but you can 100% have that same emotion. Because, whether it's hormones or thoughts or emotions, when you change one, you change all 3. And when you put yourself into experiences that allow you to feel that desired emotion, now, all of a sudden, your cortisol levels are decreasing, your subconscious mind begins to seek out more evidence to confirm that this new belief that peace and calm is possible for you. And now, all of a sudden, you have a heck of a lot less resistance between you and that house because your brain is already primed with the emotion. And I like to think about it like this, right? You have to become an internal match for the external goal. How would future you feel if they had more money or the house? Whatever that is, go do more things that will naturally make you feel that same way, so that your internal state becomes a match for your external goal. Okay, now some might call this manifesting, but this is all essentially you becoming the new parent to your mind and body and trusting in yourself instead of trusting that someone or something will come to save you. Because I hate to be the one to break it to you, but that's probably not happening. And I want to go back to the caterpillar butterfly analogy just one more time before I let you go off and do the work. Because there's 2 very important things to understand about this critter's metamorphosis. Number 1, they got to stay away from pesticides. If they are exposed to any sort of growth regulators like pesticides, it prevents them from entering the next phase of the life cycle. And number 2, if the chrysalis opens too soon, even a day before scheduled, like if someone tries to, help it out by cutting it open, the butterfly won't survive. The process is a miracle of perfect timing. So give yourself grace and patience. This is happening on a divine timeline, honey, and it is not meant to be forced. And stay away from toxicity. There's no room for that in your future self's life. Cut it out now. Just like that caterpillar, it is blocking you from entering in to this next phase of your life cycle. And most importantly, remember what you're meant for. You are not here to stay at ground level your whole life, bestie. You are meant to fly. Your reset moment might not be loud. It might be quiet. It might be a huge shift all at once, or it might be a bunch of tiny shifts over the course of months and years. Your journey won't be the same for me or anyone else. It's yours, and it is truly a journey and not a destination. So with that, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Millennial Reset. If you like what you heard, be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen. You can always learn more about ways to support yourself, like my self-directed program, the Millennial Mindset Makeover. It is designed specifically for millennials who are ready to take on the inner work of challenging your subconscious beliefs, stripping away the conditioning that keeps us stuck, living in this same repeat cycle, and start rediscovering that most authentic, badass version of you that's been hidden away all these years. Learn more about that and other support options at www.themillennialreset.com. See you next time, and in the meantime, heal on, besties. Heal on.